Okay, do I need to? Okay, everyone can hear me? Well, thank you very much, and I'll be quick about this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the inferences that we can make regarding the neurobiological status of this age of development. Because this is not a stage that people that study brain development have really concentrated on. However, we're all quickly rising to the occasion. So let me know what I can tell you about up to this point. So, excuse me, can I see my slides here? Sorry, I can't quite see what I'm showing you, so it's a little bit difficult, but that's all right. I can move over here and kind of see it in the meantime. So, as you've heard, this is a distinct stage, and what I'm going to be presenting to you is how this stage is different from the adolescent stage, where many of us have been focusing our energies in trying to understand this crazy stage. So young adults should have something that is unique and different. And some of the things that I want to point out is that significant neurobiology has already reached adult levels. This is distinct from the adolescent period. And something that we know, there we go, thank you. Something that we know is also unique to this period is the significant changes in the environment. So that now you are in a situation where you have semi-independence, right? Me paying the tuition bills and rent. But there is this huge, perhaps even the burden of freedom, which is the planning for the future. You've graduated, you have these new places that you can go. So that is a burden that can affect the brain because the behavior is always remodeling the brain. So with that vein, let me get your mind into thinking. If we're going to think about brain and how it is affected in this stage of development, it's important to think of plasticity. Brain plasticity is available throughout the lifespan. However, there are different types that play more primary roles at different stages. Early in development, you see plasticity that is more experience expectant. There is a biological time clock. Puberty comes, hormones range, you want to couple up, you want to start, forming your peer relationships. However, there's also experience-dependent plasticity methods, which I really believe might really start to characterize the young adulthood period. Because here we're talking about changes that you are doing at the individual level, depending on the particular environmental demands that you have. And these are done by different types of brain processing ways, which are regressive and progressive methods. So let me tell you a little bit about the brain structure. Now, on the left, I'm showing you some brains that some results from a colleague of mine at the NIH. It's a very well-known slide that is shown. Blue is showing the thinning of the cortical gray matter. This is where the neurons reside. And what is known from histological studies and so forth is that you lose synaptic connections. So in the first 2 years of life, you're multiplying with those, the way that the neurons talk to one another. And then you start to lose it depending on the environmental demands. And this is a very good thing. It's the way that the brain has to sculpt itself to its particular environment. Now, what I'm showing you here in this classic study is that the thinning of the cortical gray matter continues throughout into 21 years of age. However, in this study, they did not study anyone older than 21. So we don't know if there's continued actual maturation that might be occurring. What we do know is that there are significant changes from the adolescent stage. There are areas in prefrontal cortex, areas in temporal regions that support cognition and social emotional processing that already have reached a great leap ahead of adolescence. The one in the middle is representing a part of the brain called the basal ganglia, the striatum. This is a very important part of the brain because this is a part of the brain that is crucial for motivation, for learning, It is involved in drug addiction. It is involved in happiness. It's very, very critical during development and might still be playing a very crucial role during young adulthood. Because in this study, what they found is that there is a dramatic change between adolescence and adulthood. And this region, basal ganglia and prefrontal cortex, over here, which underlies cognition, these have late protracted maturation. Now, when we think about the neurotransmitters, dopamine is the pleasure neurotransmitter. The learning neurotransmitter lives primarily in this area of the brain, the basal ganglia. I'm showing you an inverted U-shaped function, meaning that across species, based on animal work, there seems to be a peak in the amount of this chemical that is in the brain. And you might think a peak that occurs during adolescence. However, I've highlighted with a red square the fact that young adulthood is still within that range of having more dopamine, but it is beginning to decrease as you go through later adult ages. Now, however, I did find that there are some potentially interesting changes that might be occurring in the brain still during this period. Now, what I'm showing you here is a graph that I made based on the data from the classic post-mortem study of Huttenlocher. And here we're showing on the vertical axis the number of connections in the brain depending on the cortical layers, which are very informative as to what the brain can do. And typically what everybody uses this line of work to show is that the number of connections have reached adult levels by adolescence. However, because I was giving a talk here, I studied this article even further and unpacked the data that was provided on a table as to what is occurring during the young adult period. Because usually we just average all of that. And what I found was that there seems to be a continuation of the pruning of the specialization that goes into young adulthood. And then there might be a shift. So I am speculating about what this could be telling us, but I'm excited because I think that what it could be telling us is that there is a qualitative shift in the way that the brain is now being affected by the environment. And you'll see this recurrent theme as I go along, showing you some more indications for continued brain maturation. So I told you about the gray matter, the neurons, and so forth. The other dramatically important part of the brain are the connections, the pathways, the highways, how different brain regions can integrate into a smooth, collaborative business or company that can really be successful in its endeavors. And I'm showing you in these graphs, and I do have a lighter, but does it go there? Yeah. So here I'm showing you the superior longitudinal fasciculus, which is really the pathways that allow you to really engage cognition and executive function that are very important for decision making. Well, that white matter tract, and this I'm showing you, based on cross-sectional studies from colleagues and our own actually longitudinal data that is, I have to get back and read the paper and submit it because it's really close already. In any case, the take home here is that the highways that allows us to have cognitive control are there. They're actually available. And that's an important thing to know. As you can tell, even adolescents, but more so young adults, they're able to make the decisions. They're proud of the fact that they can make these decisions. However, there are other highways. For example, one is the cingulum that travels through the middle of the brain. It integrates cognitive aspects of behavior, but also emotional aspects of behavior. The ability to to monitor our performance, integrate error processing, is driven by this highway, which continues to mature through young adulthood. And one that I find fascinating is the uncinate fasciculus. This is a highway that travels from prefrontal, but also to the emotional centers, memory centers, and social emotional theory of mind centers. It's the social emotional circuitry. This persists in its maturation through young adulthood. And why am I stressing this? Is that whenever we see periods of great growth, it's periods of remodeling, it's periods of plasticity, and this is what might be characterizing this stage of development. So let me tell you very quickly about brain function. So here what I'm showing you is a longitudinal study where we looked at subjects up to 27 years of age. And what we found is, and I really want to stress this because I think there is this notion that people think that the last thing to develop is prefrontal executive function. Not the case. This becomes available by adolescence. It's there. We can make these decisions based on prefrontal goal-directed behavior. And that's what I'm showing you here. Dorsolateral prefrontal cortex showing decreases in the ability and the need to use this region to curb our impulses. And in fact, what continues to increase throughout young adulthood, and I'm showing it here in the middle of the brain, is the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. I just told you the white matter bundle in this area is still maturing. Well, its function seems to be showing the same thing. What this area is well known to do, it lights up when you make an error so that you can subsequently use it to inform future behavior. This continues to improve, and it's highly related to the behavioral improvements that we see in the control of impulses. Now, when we think about reward motivation, we're seeing something that's a little bit interesting as well to young adulthood. Again, these are the emphases that I can make because we have not been concentrating on young adulthood as its own stage. In black is adults, in red is adolescents. This is a typical finding. I'm showing you my work, but B.J. Casey and a whole group of us have been finding similar findings. Adolescents show this overreactivity to rewards, which is more so than young adults. However, what I'm showing you here is that what young adults do is that when they're presented with reward, they immediately process that, but they immediately temper it and are able to not have that affect their ability to make decisions. I'm showing you here work by Larry Steinberg's group doing a driving task looking at the effects of peers. Yes, in adolescence, in the presence of peers, the reward part of the brain becomes extremely reactive. By young adulthood, it does not appear to be the case. Yes, we care about our friends, not to the degree that it's going to distract. So there is good tempering that's going on in young adulthood. Okay. And then finally, social emotional processing. This is a very complex part of the brain. It is the most complex neural system computation that the brain can do, makes us uniquely humans. So of course it has a later development and maturation that will persist through young adulthood. And the sort of things that we can see that other people have seen, this is from BJ's group and this Sarah Jane Blakemore's group, showing that during the adolescent period, there seems to be an overreactivity in places like the amygdala for emotional sort of stimuli. There's also during the adolescent period, a more difficult time to be able to integrate the perspective of others that can lead to these feelings of guilt and embarrassment and so forth. But by young adulthood, this seems to really be starting to get online. So, in conclusion, what I want to leave you with is that young adults, they do have access to mature prefrontal executive systems. This is huge, and you can see it in them. They're making decisions. Oh, I want to study art. That is a decision that they're actually very capable of doing. What is important to understand is that there might be continued maturation of systems supporting performance monitoring and social emotional processing that is working with this ability to make decisions. And I think that this is an important aspect to think about also in an adaptive nature. I think every stage of development is not an impaired adult stage. It is an optimal stage that is very adapted to what is needed during that lifetime. So I speculate and I propose that a mature prefrontal executive system guided by continued maturation in social emotionally processing, may support a shift in the pursuit of long-term life goals. I talk to my kids, 20 and 22. They're really starting to think about this in a way that they never had before. What am I really going to be when I grow up? And I think that the brain supports that aspect of you. So finally, I always like to thank everyone that helps me with all these things. Thank you very much.